Yeah, Alexander, now we are trying on a new role as a technical co-founder. Could you tell us, was it is it your first attempt, or was there something prior to this one?
Actually, it was. I made many attempts, I guess, since the university, but it's the first time I'm making something in the team.
And what were those attempts? Were they applications? And tell us a bit about them.
In the university, I even tried to make my own operating system, which was
Did it work?
crazy when.
Did it work?
Of course not. It had only 70 lines of code. So, but then I started to think about a new recommendation service that would be built on what we called then Web 3.0. Now, of course, Web 3 is all about cryptocurrency, but at the time it was about content that would be structurized by itself or some smart algorithms. And I had many problems with this project at that time because I had very little experience, and I was trying to make a backend design, front end, everything by myself. And even for my startup project in backend, I decided to use CQRS. CQRS, it's a approach that only I guess big companies use for the distributed system with a very complex architecture. It was crazy that I decided to use this because the project that could have taken, I guess, 2 months maximum, took 5, only because of this approach. But I learned a lot of new things thanks to that. And actually, that's how I landed my first RS job, thanks to this project, because I left my that time job for a while to work on my own project and decided to learn how to make applications for iOS. And it was the opportunity for me to find, after this, there was an opportunity for me to find something in front end and iOS. So even my project has failed. The experience was very valuable, and I could use a lot of it now in our new project. First of all, not to do a lot of mistakes in sense of over engineering that I made that time.
Does your co-founder agree that you actually avoid over-engineering? Have you ever asked?
Actually, I think not exactly. There is a big disagreement on this topic, but I'm trying to find compromise. You see, it's always very difficult because your engineering personality always try to take over, and you think that you could make something simple, but then you see that there are a lot of room for improvements with your code, and it's very difficult to stop and not to. But on the other hand, if you plan everything right from the beginning, it's much more easier to iterate, to try new things, to make experiments. Because if you usually have as many startups do this spaghetti code, for example, like we call it, then if business will come to you and ask to change something very small, it will be very
And
difficult.
they surely do come. Yeah, every time. Like
Yes,
it's literally impossible to make something from the first attempt. And
yes. So
yeah.
it's very, very important to find right balance between engineering and speed of development.
Yeah, what I also found difficult as a permanent startup worker, I would say, I was a product manager in several startups. Personnel turnover there is crazy. So every time a new engineer comes in after just several months or a year of another engineer's work, he or she takes over something very hard to figure out, and yeah, instantly told that they have to uh, yeah, only do new features and nothing else. Business requires in certain amounts of time with sharp deadlines, and it gradually becomes worse because there is a huge debt that others left because they don't really think like in for a long run. They won't be there in a year already, so why think? Yeah, and it's also we come again to this topic of having good communication skills when you have to convince business that it actually is important, especially considering how developers have a reputation to be very curious and try new technologies, sometimes unnecessary for business and even dangerous in terms of like this unexplored territory with a lot of room for failure. So yeah, and it's always like yeah a game, but I would agree that if nobody thinks of it, you're gonna be stuck somewhere down the road when nothing can be done, even a little tiny thing, because of the system in what I say inflexibility. So, have you ever tried to commercialize those early attempts, or were you thinking purely like a training experience, a training opportunity?
Yeah, actually, I tried with one project. I found what I thought at the time would be a very creative way to promote it by using by Medium. I decided to run my own blog, and the problem was that my project that time needed a lot of content, and without content there would be no users, but without users there would be no content. It's a classical problem, and I was afraid that if I will just advertise it, people will install it and wouldn't find what they are interested in. So I decided if I would write some article on some topic, for example, and I will advertise this topic, and I will have content in my project that is connected with this topic, then people who would come to my project would be the same people who read this article and are already interested in it. But I guess maybe the topic was very boring because I like history, society, all things like that, and I was writing about it, so I didn't have much many installs.
Why do you think you stopped developing it?
Oh, I guess the reason was obvious because I realized that the only way to make it work would be a lot of investments. And I myself, I'm not very good in networking, first of all. And secondly, the time, there were a lot of accommodation systems that were based on AI, And my idea was to take a lot of control from AI to users, back to users. And I realized that the idea could work, but it would be very difficult to sell it to investors when everyone talking about AI. To come and say that we don't need AI for this would be crazy. And I decided to postpone this project for some time.
Yeah, so maybe when everything is controlled by AI, people will realize that they want
Yes,
something of them
exactly.
present, yeah, in their feed, and then they'll come to you for help. Was there anything that you would do differently if you started over?
Or a lot of things. First of all, I would finally to try to gather some team, at least my people there because this project is very difficult to be okay, to be made by one person. And secondly, I wouldn't of course try to go so big from the beginning because my biggest problem was that I I couldn't choose a feature too that would be useful for uh, people from the start and implement this. I wanted to create a fully immersive experience because I thought it would be the main feature of this project, and it was very difficult. It was a lot of work, and I couldn't check if people would actually like this approach or not. So now I would try to go small. My first idea was that like you say, there is this famous meme about engineering where there is a wolf, and the wolf is the result of evolution. Then there is a mops, and the mops is a result of intelligent engineering design. And that's the biggest problem because each it's how nature work. The same way everything should work in our world, including startups. Iteration is the best way to create something great. It's almost impossible to create something great just from scratch without all these steps.
And at the same time, you're a big like anti-fan. I don't know what to, like how to put it, but um, a big non-advocate for agile. You hate this approach, and
No, I wouldn't say exactly that. I mean, look, for example, at electrical cars. When the first electrical cars they started to emerge a few decades ago, but no one would use them because even the idea was great, the implementation was awful in all sense, in all aspects. And to prove that electrical car can actually be as good as any other car and even better, you needed to create this first, and that's what Tesla did with their cars. So the same thing here. Some ideas they could be checked with some small experiments, but for some ideas you need to create almost a complete project just because without all these details it, no one would actually feel like it's great and they could use it. They would say something like, oh, it's an interesting idea, but it would never work. I wouldn't use this, but I like how you think or something like this. And it's not the way to make a good business too. So sometimes you need to create the whole thing. Sometimes you could try and experiment.
Even now, you face a huge scarcity of resources. How do you overcome it, technically speaking? So you have a product roadmap and a lot of features on it. So can you make an example, maybe a few, of how you optimize product features in order to be more technically efficient?
First of all, I would try to show some examples. Like, for example, many startups, they completely ignore things like design system, for example, because they will first try, see how it works, and if it works, they will find some good designer, some engineering team, and they will build this design system. But I think that when you use even some clumsy but still design system from the scratch, you have a better overview of what you could work with and use these elements in every feature. You stop yourself from creating new elements for every feature every time because you think that they would be good here because you already have design system and you are forced to use the same elements, and because they already implemented, you could move faster. So these artificial constraints take sometimes to create, but in reality, they help you to move faster. And another thing is, for example, when you use some animation, some startups want want to be beautiful and aesthetic from the beginning, and they spend a lot of time to make these beautiful animations. But some simple animations could be created even now with a few CSS code, which for me was a revelation actually, because I had, I guess, about 5 years break in HTML CSS field. And when I returned there, I realized that so many simple but efficient things could be done just with simple CSS, and it's great. And when you create something, you should first of all try to use these features. And if they are not enough, only then you need to think how to make something on your own. But still, the basis always should be the what platform offers you, not what you want, how it works. And another benefit of this is that, like for example, you create some iOS application, and you want to make it how you see it, but the people who use iOS, they are accustomed to some experience. And when you use what UIKit or SwiftUI provide you with, you create the same kind of user experience, and as a result, it's easier for people to use your products without difficult onboarding, which is, I guess, a huge factor of low conversion rate. So all this, I mean, it would sound a little mixed, but details are important. But some details are better to be left out, at least for some time, because they usually they took I guess not most of the time, but much time of you spent on working on some feature is about details. So try to use frameworks as they are, at least while you're trying some hypothesis, and only then improve and improvise.
The last question, probably in this portion. is that like as a technical co-founder of Askapro specifically, what was the toughest decision you made, if you can remember it?
For me, I guess the toughest decision was the one that my CEO finally uh, made me to take. Because I really wanted for us to have this beautiful aesthetic iOS application, because I like to create things for iOS. But slowly I came to a realization that for business it wouldn't be very helpful, and I need to remember some JavaScript and HTML, CSS, and it's still sometimes difficult for me, because I think that I could have this so much better if it would be as application, but with time it's easier and easier, and I understand that if you find a right balance, like for example, now we're not trying to make what we call web application, we're making site, but site with a lot of handy features, and we use JavaScript for these features, and it helps helps me to gain all this how to say it, pleasure from creating something, even in spite the fact that JavaScript and HTML are the technologies that I still don't really like for many reasons. None of them, none of these reasons are objective, but still, it's my personal opinion, and for me, it's a struggle. But it's what we have to understand, that there are goals and there are ways to achieve these goals, and sometimes the way that you prefer isn't the best way to do this. So you need to adjust and adapt.
So, second thing is that yeah, I was just I was going to explain this decision to transition from a mobile application on iOS to a website. From very beginning, we understood very well that a marketplace is far more accessible from a website form, and we went with mobile application because this is what our team could do, and unfortunately or not, I don't know, it's just life. Like, you always consider those things, like the technology the team is familiar with, especially if you're bootstrapped. So it's totally understandable, but finally we just turned to the road of a website because we have wonderful engineers who can adapt, especially our non-CTO technical co-founder. So, yeah. And Sasha, thank you for the fresh point of view and amazing talk today. I would like to ask you, who do you think you can help via Askapro platform as a consultant?
I would say with a few topics, like for example, if you're trying if you want to start a new project, for example, and you have not technical experience at all, but you have an idea, and you need to decide what team do you need, what technology stack you would use, and things like that. Uh, you could describe me your product, answer some question, and I will try to provide you with best approach here. And if you, for example, a junior developer in iOS who wants to develop himself in some direction. For example, right now, as you know, everything in the world of software development is changing so quickly, and there are a lot of basic fundamental stuff that many developers now ignore because we all go through all these courses and get our certificates, but the basic CS is still important, and I will guide you through this to if you want this. And just if you have any questions about your current technical stack or want to change something, you could ask me too, and maybe I would be helpful here.
Thank you. And for mature companies, what are the areas you focused on at your prior workplaces, and you can just be a guide to navigate, I don't know, any kind of like problem or stage, maybe?
I usually worked in some financial companies, fintech like banking, for examples. And if you have some specific tasks, I could give you some advice here. And also, if, for example, your company now is on the stage of some big changes, for example, like you want to rebuild your application from the scratch or something like this, I have created and refactored a lot of applications myself, and I could guide you here too.
Thank you. So yeah, and I'll just remind our audience that you can find all the cases of Alexander in detail in his profile. The link will be in the description. And also, if you have any questions, just ask them in the comments and we will try to reply. I will notify Sasha to of your interest, and hopefully he will share his insights on the topics that would be of interest to to a number of people. But if you want to book a meeting, go straight to profile and there you will find a request form.